Welcome back to the Center for Equus Coaching. We're a community of coaches who believe that partnering with horses can help transform the way we connect with ourselves, others, and the world around us. I'm Travis Stock, one of the instructors here at the Center for Equus Coaching, and I'm back to introduce you to another fabulous Equus coach. Sheppard Lake is a leadership and organizational development consultant, executive coach, and Equus Coaching Master Facilitator who serves as a catalyst for self-discovery for her clients. Whether it's helping an executive better understand themselves through more traditional 360 assessment tools or through the feedback of a 1,000-pound animal, Sheppard has a way of helping her clients get to the core of what needs to change in service of the better future they imagine. Sheppard and I have known each other, get this, for well over a decade at this point.
Oh my God.
That's wild to me. And now I'm excited to get to introduce her to all of you. Thanks for joining me, Sheppard.
Hi. I realized when you said well over a decade, it has been. I think we met in 2014 or 15.
I was trying to track this, and the only way that I was able to do that was I looked on Facebook, and we've been friends since 2013.
Oh,
So,
wow. So even before. Oh, wow.
wild. And we're different people than we were back then. That's for
Totally.
sure. Yeah.
I
All
actually
thanks to the
I had
horses.
blonde hair.
I had more hair. Is there anything about you as a person and as a professional that I didn't mention that feels important for people to know about you before we jump into the conversation?
I'd say that the way you described me is definitely how my business is today. And it feels like it's constantly shifting. As we
Mm-hmm.
continue the conversation, I'll add in other pieces as they feel appropriate.
So tell me, how did you even find out about Equus coaching and what drew you to wanting to sign up for the Equus coach training?
Yeah, that path is a windy one.
Mm,
I think a lot of us grew up around horses. I took horseback riding from the time my parents would allow all the way through college. And then, of course, life gets in the way. But even then, when I would find that I was going through something difficult, I would find someone who would allow me to ride their horse. It was therapeutic to me. And speaking of time gaps, I guess it was about 20 years ago, my mother took me on vacation to a mind, body, spirit resort in Arizona, Miraval, and
mm,
insisted that I do the equine experience. And so, with a guy named Wyatt Webb. And I had a mind blowing, life changing, transformational experience with a horse named Imus. And when I walked away from that experience, I knew that I had to find a way to create something like that for others. And it's too long a story to share here. People can go on my website, on my About page, and read the story. But after that, I went on the search. I attended Linda
mm.
Kohanov's program. I attended Ariana Strozzi's program. I went back to Wyatt and said, "Can I work with you?" and attended his program. And they were all missing something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And
Mm.
then I was going through a master coach training, and Equus was one of the experiences that we participated in. And I was like, that's the missing piece. And I immediately signed up for the Equus coach training and then master facilitator training. And now I'm a mentor for new students. So yeah,
Mm.
it's been quite the journey.
Now, on the other side of all of that, what would you label, or what can you pinpoint now was the thing that was missing in some of the other horse programs that you were doing that the Center for Equus Coaching had that drew you in?
Yeah, it was that coaching piece. And a lot of
Mm,
people teach coaching, but there's
mhm.
the way that we do it, and coaching by its definition asks questions to allow other people to come to their own answers. But there's this guidance that we provide and this space that's held in a way that allows that discovery and that revealing to be uncovered. I think a lot of people approach therapy, coaching, any type of self-help thing, thinking they need someone to help fix what's broken. And
Right.
we approach things from the place of nothing, no one is ever broken and nothing is ever broken.
Mm.
Through us partnering with the horses, we're able to help you unveil the pieces that were there all along.
Mhm. Yeah, that really speaks to what I've gained out of Equus coaching. What I'm most grateful for is that I walked into my first Equus coaching session truly believing something was wrong with me, truly believing and identifying with the broken parts. And it's been a real gift to be able to see that I'm not broken, that there's nothing that needs to be fixed. Of course, new awarenesses are helpful and they're supportive, but learning to just like truly accept myself and to belong within myself and with other people has been such an important part that horses have really helped model for me and help me shift into.
Yeah, absolutely. I even recall probably halfway through my very first training sitting down with the instructors and saying, "I don't think I fit in." And
Mm.
one of the best things that they said to me was, "We are about the 14th person today who's come and said that," because we
Yeah,
all feel
yeah,
that way. Once we start to see ourselves a little bit differently instead of the face we put out in society to try and one of the things that I learned from my very first experience from the horse that I try to be something that everybody else wants so that they'll like me. And once I start to step into my own, all of a sudden I don't recognize myself. I don't know how other people
yeah.
would.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so true, and you're right that many people say that to us coming in. I always affectionately say we're the land of misfit toys,
Yes.
and we're all just trying to find belonging, and so we find it with each other because we have felt different or odd
Right.
or felt like we needed to change inherent aspects of ourselves in order to fit in, and when we're tired of that and no longer can do that, it does feel a little like, "Okay, have I given up on belonging or having any sense of community, or am I able to find it in a different way?"
Yeah, exactly.
So one of my favorite things to explore with people is that our work is so experiential that it's very hard to describe in words. But I like to challenge us to do so because we do have to find ways to communicate about it. So if you were talking to somebody who didn't know about Equus coaching at all, how would you describe it to them as a way of like getting them interested in wanting to sign up for a session with you?
I think this is the hardest part of the work.
Hmm.
Like, the worst coaching experience I've ever had, the most difficult coaching experience I've ever had doesn't even compare to trying to explain what this is. So I tend to say something along the lines of that it's a transformational experience where we work with horses from the ground to better understand ourselves and our relationships. I usually talk about how horses are very perceptive beings, and so they respond to more of our emotional state, our energetic state, what's going on inside of us, than they do to our words. So what this
Hmm.
does is it creates this honest mirror for us. They help us begin to close that gap between our intentions of how we want to be versus what we embody. In other words, horses reveal who we're being instead of
Mm.
who we're trying to be. So we get to
Ooh.
see those places where we hold ourselves back and open up those places that propel us forward.
Oh, that is so true. That's the very first learning I ever got from a horse was how much I was performing a version of
Hmm.
myself and how actually that got in the way of the
Yeah.
connection. I couldn't connect with the horse from that performance. I actually had to risk vulnerability, risk being seen as imperfect in order to actually make that connection. That was a huge aha moment, and then trying to unpack that over many years later has been kind of the primary thing that I've gotten from them.
Yet people will walk away from the experience and say, "That didn't even begin to describe what this is." And
Totally.
and like you said, it's so experiential. It's difficult to put words on something that is felt so deeply.
So tell me a little bit about your version of Equus coaching. We teach a set of skill sets and a sort of foundational value system around coaching and working with horses. But we also feel really it's important to allow each one of these Equus coaches that are out there in the world to really embody it in a way that feels authentic to them, to not have to be just like Travis as an instructor for this program, but to find your own version. So, how do you describe your version of Equus coaching in the world?
Well, before I get into mine, first of all, if we could all be like Travis, then we'd all be fabulous. So,
Oh,
I've
that's
learned
very kind
so
of you.
much from your experience, or watching your teaching, your coaching, the videos that we get to see, you're right. That's one of the things I do love about this work. When I'm not a fan of dogma, and so this has been a really beautiful experience from that perspective. Um, so. I work in a field called conscious leadership, and just as an aside, I wanna be clear that I don't limit leadership to managing others. I
Mm,
believe that we all lead our own experience of life and work, so we're all leaders whether we are in a corporate environment or not. And when we look at conscious leadership, it's really the practice of leading from presence instead of the unconscious patterns that we've learned over time. And we work with human beings as a whole person, not just as
mm.
doers of tasks or a means to an end of revenue and profit. And that's not to say that revenue and profit.
Wait, there's more to us
I
than
know.
that?
Can you believe it?
I'm
We're not just
shocked.
numbers anymore. Um,
Oh,
and those are important. They're necessary for us to keep our businesses running. At the same
sure.
time, when we work with someone who values the wholeness of who we are and what we bring to the table, then that only enhances what we can do together. It
Mhm.
enhances that creativity and what you mentioned earlier, that sense of belonging. So, the other part of work that I do that partners beautifully with this is mindfulness and mindfulness meditation. Most of my clients are groups. The majority are corporate groups, but they also include other coaches. Like, if listeners may have heard of a woman by the name of Susan Hyatt, who's very well known
Mm.
for a life coach school that she teaches, as well as other programs. And sometimes she'll bring me in for an Equus day. And then I have groups of women who just want to get to know themselves better or learn different things about themselves and how they are in relationship that they'll invite me in. Um, and so, yeah, I kind of work with people to help them suss out what it is that they want to do as it relates to their own experience of themselves and how they relate in the world.
Are there any, like, meaningful stories that come up when you think about some of the clients you've worked with or workshop settings you've hosted?
So there are two stories that come to mind that hit both sides of that, the mindfulness piece and the corporate piece. Both of them happen to be corporate groups. Whenever I do a group, if at all possible, do a mindfulness meditation in the pasture with the horses. And this particular group, there were several people who were a bit nervous about it. And as you know from
Mm,
doing this, the horses enjoy being a part of this. So we tend to get in a circle and leave enough space between us that the horses can come into the circle if they'd like. In this particular group, those horses weren't even close to our circle. Like they were off in their own world. During the debrief, one of the women started speaking about grief and emotions started to come up, and she almost pushed them down. One of the horses from way across the pasture came, made a beeline through the middle of the circle, went straight up to the woman, nose on the heart.
mm.
And and Renee were there, who were also, as you know, instructors. Were like, you can't make this stuff up. It wasn't like
Right.
cue the magic movie moment, bring in the horse.
Uh-huh.
It just happens when we're willing to be vulnerable and congruent. And I'm gonna guess if that woman had kept, pushed down those emotions, that horse would have never come over because as you know, they look for us to be genuine, to be authentic, to be real, to be congruent to whatever we're feeling, to allow that to be on the outside.
That's so true, and I think that a lot of people think whenever they've got an emotional experience happening, whether that's nervousness, whether that's grief, any sort of emotional experience that's going on, because of our social conditioning from human to human, we've taught ourselves a lot to hold things down, to pretend like everything's okay, to not acknowledge what's coming up for us. And yet horses actually don't understand, they don't have the ability to do that. And so the tension that that creates inside of us when we're holding things down is actually something that often with a prey animal sort of is going to create space between you and in that
Yeah.
connection. And it's actually the real authentic expression, the willingness to let it be there, to not choke it down, that actually creates space for the connection to really truly exist and for that horse to come all the way from the other side of that pasture to come in and hold space for
Yeah.
that person. I love that part of our work. We could never script it. It's not training. It feels like magic a lot of times. I just love that
Yeah.
part of our work.
And to build on that, we not only cut off that connection with the horse, we cut off that connection with each other. I mean, I'm sure you recall
Yeah.
the number of times that I had to, be the person who knew, the one who,
Mm.
came in prepared so that I could be the gold star girl, and that cuts off connection. It's when you are willing to say, "Yeah, oof, I don't know about this. I don't know what I'm doing here. I need help."
Yeah.
That's when we have connect with
Yeah.
others.
Yeah, it's that
Yeah.
performance of self, who we learn to be in this world in order to fit in, belong, to get our value in our relationships with other people. It's amazing how we learned those strategies, many of us pretty early on in our lives, and we get to see the limitations of those strategies as we play them out in our adult lives, where they actually get in the way of what we're really
Yeah,
truly seeking.
absolutely. And another corporate group, it's a national organization I'd been working with for quite some time, and uh, finally got them out to the horses because they had some team dynamics issues they wanted to work through. And whenever we would do team dynamics programs, we would always start with individual sessions so that they would get used to what it's like to be one on one with a horse.
Yeah.
And there was one guy, he was relatively new, we'll call him Bill. And Bill was so excited. He's like, "Oh, I can't wait to get to the horses. It's going to be so exciting." And we were at a ranch in Arizona where they have very tall walls. And as you recall, in that location, when the horses get in there, they can't see their herd mates, so they get very vocal, and they're a little bit more active
Mhm.
when they move around. So it came Bill's time.
Mhm.
And he's like, "Yeah, I'm not doing this." And because of the number of people we broke for lunch, and I was talking to him, I was like, "Tell me what's going on, because you were so excited about this." And he said, "I'm terrified I'm going to get hurt." So I offered,
Mhm.
the person I was partnering with could continue the sessions, and would he be willing to do a session outside where the round pen is open, it's right next to the rest of the horses. They aren't as vocal and active sometimes, and he does not ever have to go into the round pen if he doesn't want to. And he said, yeah, he'd be willing to do it.
Yeah.
So I got a horse on halter and lead line. He was outside the round pen. I was inside, took him over. He, invited him. If he felt comfortable, he could touch the horse. And if he didn't, then we could just chat. And we talked about what he was feeling, the fear he was feeling, and where else that might be feeling a bit familiar, and how he handled it versus how he'd like to handle it. And we just took tiny little steps. The next one was come inside the round pen and stand in the middle, and I'll be on the side. And then come over, and while we're talking, just stroke the horse. And what if we walk? And now why don't you hold up end of the lead line? I'll still stay closest to the horse, and switch positions, and then take the lead line off and the halter off, and just be with the horse, and then move the horse, just a gentle movement. And through this process, ended up that by the end of it, he's like, "You can go." And I stepped outside of the round
Mm.
pen and watched Bill, with great joy, move this horse around the round pen at any speed that felt comfortable for him. So at one point, he was so
Mm.
afraid that he wasn't going to go in at all. And now he's by himself in a round pen moving a horse. And that translated to how he showed up with his new team, with his clients, with his boss, and with himself. And it was a complete transformation in about 20 minutes, which we see a lot.
Wow. It is amazing how
Yeah.
much can happen in 20 minutes when we're not just exploring something at conceptual level at the mind, we're actually embodied, when we're actually relationally
Uh-huh.
developing some learning. It seems to move much faster and integrate much faster when somebody's fully engaged rather than just thinking through the mind. What you're talking that example gives such it touches on a core like value system of for us as at the Center for Equus Coaching, which is that growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone, nor does it happen when we're panicking, when we're completely outside of our window of tolerance. There's this sweet zone in the middle that is like where we're stretching. We might call it the learning zone, but we're like stretching, we're trying new things, we're experimenting, we're feeling some discomfort because we're not in the comfort zone. But we're not so far into the panic zone that now we're just in a self preservation or self protection mode. And so that example of taking little steps here and there keeps Bill in his window of tolerance, keeps him in that learning zone so that he can keep stretching, he can keep trying it out. And how much more learning came from the fact that you were willing to give him that space to ease into it rather than push him all the way into the panic zone and what that might have created. So it's such a great example that sort of illustrates one of our core philosophies of like, yeah, for sure, we're going to stretch, we're going to grow, but let's do it in a way that's sustainable for us as people rather than having some sort of like enjoyment out of being outside of our
Yeah,
window of
and it's a
tolerance in
healthy
some way.
fear. It's like you said, there's a 1,000-pound animal
Mm.
sitting there. So it's a healthy fear to have. It's just in that moment, is it necessary? And can we the fact that he was willing to say, I'm terrified, it's that congruence piece we were talking about earlier.
So something that I know that I feel in my work right now, and I know a lot of other people in the coaching world that are sort of navigating sort of the uncertainty of the world and having to shift our businesses around all of that. How are you navigating this current landscape in your business
Yeah,
and as an
it's
Equus
a
coach?
it's a new world. It's interesting. Years ago, I spoke at a conference about personal empowerment, and one of the things I said was that all of our behaviors are driven by two emotions, love and fear. And love isn't the romantic kind of
Mm,
love. It's respect, generosity, kindness, compassion, connection, even setting boundaries and holding them with a place of firmness. And when we look around
mm.
today, there's a lot of discord and polarization. We've lost the plot on humanity in a lot of places. And
For sure.
yeah.
I like that phrase. We've
And
lost the
and so
plot.
we see a lot of fear-driven behaviors and actions. We're trying to win, we're trying to be right, we're trying to protect ourselves, often at the expense of others. And don't get me wrong, fear has its place. We just talked about one of the places. When it's a healthy fear, that's a place for it, but it
Yeah.
just shouldn't be in the driver's seat. And so about a
Mm,
year ago, I attended a retreat that gave me a lot of clarity here. During one of the experiences, I went to the depth of darkness, and to be honest, I lost contact with my own plot. And it wasn't until days after I
mm,
returned from the retreat that it came to me, oddly, while slicing cucumbers. I realized that at least for me, the point was to find my way home to love and to light the path for others to do the same. And here's the thing. I
mm.
knew that if I called one of my coach friends, the response would be something along the lines of, "That's great. So how do you do that? What's your next step?" And
Mhm.
that's the clarity around that struck me was our love affair with the action plan. The immediate
Yeah.
jump to the how, the to-do list to accomplish the goal. Achievement is the holy grail. And all of this, when we focus there, it closes the gap on what I call the space between. And this is the space that is a sacred pause. It is where growth occurs while the next steps are being formed. And it is in the space where wisdom lives. And it's the kind of wisdom that can only come from the presence of being. The old me would have confused that space between with being super passive and lazy. And it's not that. It's a quiet attunement, a deep listening with the soul, to get a little woo. Um, because this is
Mm.
where the unseen is arranging itself, and where like I just said, the next steps are forming just beyond our vision. And the presence that it requires, at least for me, has not always been easy. And this is where the horses can be super, super supportive, because there's a Taoist concept called Wei Wu Wei. And it's something I did very early on when I started this work with horses before I even met anybody from the Equus community. And it's translated to action through inaction. And it basically means acting in alignment
Mm,
with a natural flow of life rather than forcing outcomes through effort, like trying really hard. So it's acting without strain or control, similar to water flowing around obstacles. So some of the most meaningful experiences I've had with the horses, and quite frankly in life, are those moments where there's no agenda, where just being in relationship and
mm,
allowing the experience to unfold. And for me, that's the deeper work. Reminding myself to return back to the presence, to the connection, to love, and to trusting that from that place, wisdom reveals itself. So when you ask me, that's a
mm.
very long intro to my answer, which is how am I dealing with that? I don't know what the future of my business is, but I know it's shifting. I know it will involve the horses. I know
Yeah.
it will involve mindfulness. And I know it will involve breath work, which is something I've just recently gotten certified in. But I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And I am in the space between right now, listening and looking at what is that going to be and how am I going to help people find their way home to love.
Uh, Beautifully said. It's such a good reminder for us as people, but also us as coaches, that action, implementation, how is only one
Yeah.
step of the change process. And I think living in a patriarchal capitalist society really trains us to be really focused on action, and that's where our value is. And I love the reminder that there's value outside of the action, that there's value in the forming, in the unknown, and the uncertainty, in the not needing to rush to the next thing to hang our ego's hat on and say, this is who I am or this is what my business is. It's like
Yeah.
the in between space. That's to me is where I find the most magic in life happens when I'm not trying to control all aspects of reality by deciding
Yeah.
this is where I'm going and this is what I want, but to actually be
Yeah.
open to co-creating with life. That the circumstances and the energies need to gather around also to oftentimes help me create something I could never have created on my own through my own mind. I think about the horse work as one of the most beautiful examples of that. I didn't have that scripted in my life. Unlike you, I didn't grow up around horses. I didn't that wasn't part of the plan was to stand next to horses and sometimes cry and have people crying near them. Like I was not scripting my life like that. And yet it is my favorite work to do. I feel lucky every time I'm standing out there on a horse ranch and getting to be in nature with these beautiful animals and other people
Yeah.
doing vulnerable, big, brave work.
It's not lost on me that there's a level of privilege in being able to sit in the space between. And not
Sure.
everybody has that luxury.
Sure.
But I also believe that regardless of whether you have that luxury, there's a space in the day somewhere that you can just be, even if it's for 5 minutes at
Yeah.
at nighttime before you go to bed, just to
Mhm.
sit in the quiet and the stillness. Because that is when the how reveals itself too. I can sit down and figure it out. I can ask AI. I can do all these things. But boy, when I'm just quiet and allow it, the best responses, the best paths are revealed. They are uncovered. There
Mm.
was a post about Robert Redford recently. I don't know if you saw it. Um, he left a recording for his great grandchildren and because he wanted them to have something from him after he passed. So he said, "This world can overwhelm, but if you slow down and sit under a tree long enough, it'll tell you everything. And if you forget who you are, draw something or go on a walk alone. Nature remembers you." And I thought, wow, it's the same with horses. If we'll just be, they'll help us see who we are. They'll help us remember.
Mm. It's a beautiful place to land it for the day. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that you found that post. If people wanted to learn more about your work, wanted to follow along and watch as your business is changing and find out what you're adding, turns into as it keeps shifting, how do they find you out there in the world?
That's www.shepherdlake.com, and there's a contact page on there that they can email me as well. One of my hopes, I keep saying this and I never do it, is to take people on retreat to South Africa to there are a couple of places I want to go where they actually have horses, so where we can do the horse work, and then we can go out to the wild animals and go a little
Mm.
deeper with a different kind of experience.
Well, thank you so much, Shepard, for joining me, for having a conversation, and for sharing sort of the journey you've been on with Equus Coaching. You're such an important part of our community and in our herd, and I'm just so grateful that we get to spend time.
Thank you so much, Travis. It's been an honor to be invited and to be a part of this process. Thank you.
If you've been listening and you're interested in becoming an Equus coach or understanding more about us, our website is equuscoach.com. Super easy to find us there. You can find a little bit more about the trainings we're offering. We offer a spring and a fall training every year. So if you want to find out more information, it's at equuscoach.com.